Hello, everybody. I'd like to welcome you all to Accessibility Talks. This is a monthly virtual meetup where we chat about digital accessibility, inclusivity, and usability. Each month, we invite a speaker to present a topic, and afterward, we invite the community to ask questions and participate in the discussion. I'm today's host, Andrew Olson. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a lead front-end developer at Bounteous. I enjoy front-end development and the challenge of making the web accessible for everyone on any device. I'm thrilled to be a part of the A11yTalks team and hosting today's discussion. Before we begin, I want to have a few rules and reminders. First and foremost, a code of conduct. So I want to let everybody know that our group seeks to provide a friendly and safe environment. We require all participants to adhere to the Accessibility Code of Conduct. This applies to all community interactions and events. This also applies to verbal questions as well as chat in the text channels. This code of conduct can be found on our website at A11yTalks.com. That's A11yTalks.com. All participants should be able to engage in productive dialogue and should share and learn with each other in an atmosphere of mutual respects. So lastly, if you have any questions for the speaker today, please post it on Twitter with the hashtag A11yTalks. That's hashtag A11yTalks. Or if you're participating in the live chat and you have a question, go ahead and add it to the YouTube window, and the A11yTalks team will be gathering those and will present those to the speaker. I'm really excited today to introduce our speaker, Todd Libby. Todd, would you like to go ahead and introduce, give us a little bit more about your background, and then we can get right into the talk.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I'm Todd Libby originally, and I see a lot of the main contingent in the YouTube chat. So originally from Portland, Maine. I now live in Phoenix, Arizona, which is quite the difference in climates. I work at Webster Store. I am in accessibility. I'm the accessibility team there, and my pronouns are he and him. I have been a professional developer accessibility person for right around 23 years or so. And been programming since I was 9. I got into computers real young. So I got into programming Commodore Basic and just went from there. But mainly my focus now is accessibility. Making things inclusive and trying to make a better web in some small way for everybody. And going around speaking at conferences. This is an article I wrote for Smashing Magazine, which I turned into a talk, and it's grown from there. And I'm also a member of the W3C. I'm an invited expert there. And I do accessibility. I work on WCAG 3 currently, which is, it's going to be a while, but we're getting there. And I host my own podcast as well on YouTube and on podcast platforms as well.
What is the name of the podcast?
The name of the podcast is Front End Nerdery.
This sounds right up my alley, being a front end nerd myself. This is great.
But yeah, that's a little bit about me. Being from Maine, I do love lobster, especially lobster rolls. So had to throw that in there.
Excellent. Well, that's great. I'm going to put in the YouTube chat. We do offer captions during this. So I'm going to put in the YouTube chat if you want to follow along with live captions. Those are provided by Thyssen. So there you go. Those are in there. So follow along with the live captioning. And just to let you know, we do clean up the captions once we're done here for accuracy and post in YouTube. So wow, that's a really great intro. really excited to have you here. Love to hear more about the smashing article.
Yeah, it was something that I had been, I guess, planning or plotting to write for quite a while before I wrote it last year. And it was just my experience in bringing accessibility to organizations, or fostering a more a more inclusive accessibility culture at an organization. So it took probably, I think, a month to get it all polished, and even then, still to this day, I've been tweaking it as I go along to each conference, and I add something here that can be of value. So usually, when I give the talk, it lasts about an hour, and the slides that I have today are going to be for the upcoming conference I'll be at, which is Magnolia JS in Jackson, Mississippi, on September 13 and 14. I'll be speaking on the 13th. If anybody's in that area and they want tickets, let me know, and I can get you a small little discount on tickets. But yeah, the article was basically my experience with bringing accessibility, talking to C-suite executives and people in between that level, and stakeholders, managers, teams, team leaders, individuals as well, people that freelance. So yes, it was just sharing my experience.
Great. I'm going to just post the article. Do you mind if I post that in the YouTube chat?
Nope, go right ahead.
Let me just do that right now. Here's the Smashing Magazine article. Strong case for accessibility. So I just put that in the YouTube chat. So if y'all want to bookmark that for later, that sounds great. A couple questions about that with the organization. So what type of organization, again, in my ignorance of this, is it like a corporation? Is it more like an agency? Is it a company that maybe has like a software product? Can you tell me a little bit more about the organization?
Yeah, it's been a wide variety, actually. No big like Fortune 500 companies, mind you, but decent sized businesses, small businesses, large businesses, decent sized corporations, as I said, individuals, freelancers, just sharing my experience in education on the matter, that I've learned over the years from the people I've followed, on Twitter and elsewhere on the web. So it's been, a wide, variety of places. I've done a lot of small businesses, because I've seen a lot of small businesses that they put up their own site. They don't have any idea about accessibility. And nowadays, if you're a small business, you don't have that legal team in case you get sued, because we've been seeing a lot of lawsuits. And, I help small businesses make sure they cover the accessibility side of things. The last client I had was a restaurant back in New England, that I built the site for them and made sure that in the contract, accessibility was covered. So they had the budget for it. They had, there was all the time for it. So things like that, medium-sized companies and higher, small corporations. That's where the battle lies, really, from my experience, because, and I'll get to it in the slides here, where, there's a lot of excuses as to why, or why they don't practice accessibility, or why they don't know anything about accessibility. So,
and it's also so interesting when all of a sudden it becomes important, right? When they see the light in whatever event that becomes. Again, we're always excited when companies do understand that, but to get them there right from the start, that sounds great.
I like to see and really enjoy seeing that light bulb moment, where you're talking to an executive. A good case is a vice president I was talking to who said, we don't have disabled users. And I said, well, you are wearing eyeglasses, so that's an assistive technology. And I saw that light bulb moment, and it was just, it's things like that, making a difference, making a change. So
I had a similar moment with a team. We were talking about an internal app, and they said, well, this is just for internal, our employees. We don't need that. And I go, oh, so we're only hiring able-bodied people.
Right.
Really quiet. It wasn't I'm making it sound harsher than what it was, but it was a moment where everybody goes, I understand now. And my brother and I often have those where we just get quiet and we go, I understand. I understand your point. I understand where you're coming from. And it is fun moment. And then, I just move beyond that as that positive, and it's like wonderful. We all have that feather now. Everybody can kind of see how nice and beautiful that is. Let's use that now. Let's apply that. So those are fun moments with the work that you do, and work that I try and bring every day.
Yeah, definitely. It drives me to do what I do and what I have been doing now since I started, and it's opening things up. Mainly, I have this list in my head where it's opening things up to disabled users, disabled people with disabilities, that they can use now, instead of going to that app or going to that website, having something that's inaccessible and not being able to access it. And that hits home because of family members, friends, and I think we all know somebody who is a person with a disability. And that's mainly what drives me. The other things that drive me are, I love the work I do. I like those light bulb moments, like I mentioned. The education and meeting people and talking with people about accessibility, and having that common ground and saying, it's the work we do, hopefully, is advancing, even though sometimes it seems like, you could pull your hair out at any time, or, those moments where it gets maddening. And like you see no alt text on an image on Twitter, and you just want to, you internally scream, and just educating people. And I love what I do, and moments like these, and where I can spread the word, is why I love this job.
Have you ever had like a personal setback where it's something that you talk about and then you find yourself not applying it, or something that you're like, wow, I'm holding myself back with this a bit, and it's a kind of your own teachable moment?
That's a really good question. I've never thought about that. Well, I do know, and this goes back many, many years ago, where I had, and I don't know how it started, but I had an inflammation in my eye, and it turned into what they call iritis, where I think it's the lens and the iris, or the lens and the pupil, are inflamed and pressed together. So you have to take steroid pills and all that stuff, and meds for it. Well, I thought I'd never see again. And that's my light bulb moment where I said, okay, I could become disabled at any time. So that really, that set me on a path even more when while I do my job. Another moment, now that I think about it, is 2019. I was at a conference in Burlington, Vermont, and I heard a friend of mine speak, and he was speaking about focus indicators. And there was this website that he showed. It's called Two Blind Brothers. And I think it's one of those websites where you order something, they send you a box and you don't know what's in it till you open it up. And when you get to the page, there's a button you can click so you can see what these two blind brothers who have Stargardt's disease, which is a macular degeneration of the eyes, where I'm not too sure, but in this example, it started in the middle and just grew and grew and grew until if you go to the website, you can see how they see. And that was another turning point for me, where I was like, okay, yeah, this is something that I want to look into. I started looking into that, and then I started looking into color contrast and all that. And that's really the impetus of what started my talks in 2021 and carrying on until now.
That's great. Thanks so much for sharing. Well, I know we've been chatting here. Would you like to go into your slides, and then we can chat a little bit more at the end?
Sure.
Make sure we get to the content of it. So what I'm going to do is I'll go ahead and add, I see you're sharing your screen, so I'm going to add that to the stream here, and then I'll just kind of drop in the background, and then just let me know when you're ready to chat some more. All right?
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Here we go.
All right. So let's do this. As you can see, this is ready for, there we go. Oh, I shouldn't do that. I gotta leave it like that. Anyways, that's better. This is ready for my upcoming conference talk, September 13th. But thank you, everybody who are in chat today. Basically, the first few slides are just a little bit about me, and you've already heard that. So making the case that your organization or anybody that is in accessibility that wants to make a case at any organization, this also applies. Basically, what I start to do is first of all, accessibility starts from the inception of a project, in my opinion. That's before development, that's before design. It starts at the level of everybody meeting and discussing of what we're here for, what are we going to do. Accessibility should be in that conversation, most definitely. So I use data, first of all, and I'll touch upon what I did before we had all the data. But today, I accessed the Web A1,000,000 report. A lot of great data there. They test 1 million homepages. They found 50.8+ million accessibility errors this past survey or this past report. It's gone down a little bit. I'd like to see that a little higher than that, but decreasing, it's a start. So as in this slide, we can see that elements per homepage went up from 887 to 955. So that just means homepages are getting more complex. And I think, If you're in accessibility, you see a lot of pages that are getting more complex with, CSS libraries or frameworks and, stuff that's constantly rolling out and that we're learning about. Not to say that any of those are bad. They have their uses, but home pages are basically getting more complex. That went up since February of last year. And as we could see, the data that I took from the WebAIM report, that 5.3% of all the homepage errors had an accessibility error. And if we're not making our homepages accessible, then what else lies underneath? That's the question I normally have when I'm doing an audit. This homepage I audit, for example, had 30 errors and several warnings. And what am I going to run into when I go to the contact page or the about page or a product page? So 96.8% of those million websites had WCAG 2 failures. And that's a lot. And those errors, again, this year, number one was low contrasted text. So I've been studying low contrast of text for quite a while now. It's one of the first talks that I gave. And my friend Homer here, who I see in the chat, he graciously allowed me to use this prime example of color contrast. Now, I have decent eyesight, and even I can't read that, but it does say, I promise it says, abuse and spam in the first box, something isn't working in the second box, and general feedback in the third box. There is some abuse there. There's definitely something that isn't working. And my general feedback would be increase your color contrast in your text and your text labels. So anybody that's not familiar with the success criteria for this, which comes from the WCAG guidelines from the W3C, it basically says right there, what it has in front of you, that the contrast ratio should be at least 4.5 to 1. There's ways of checking these contrasts. I prefer to use the color contrast analyzer by TPGI. I think it's a great tool. There are many, many, many of them out there. Your mileage may vary on what you use. I've noticed that some are different from others, but through trial and error, I've landed on the color contrast analyzer from TPGI. I think it's probably one of the best, if not the best out there. So the next one is missing alternative text, and we see this all the time. And as I mentioned earlier, like the alt text we see that some people don't put on images on Twitter. So this image right here, if I put that on Twitter, I'm going to put alt text, and we have Twitter has their way of, you can put your alternative text for that picture in there before you tweet it out. And as we probably see a lot during the day, if you're a Twitter user, that a lot of people don't put alt text on their images. And this applies for digital, this applies for web too. And there are many different ways and instances where you use, null or empty alt text. If it's a decorative image, short and concise. There's the whole debate between what is the perfect alternative text? Well, should it be short and concise, or should it be like the example I'm going to provide in a bit? So when I do talk about this at conferences, I ask people, what's wrong with that first line of code? Well, it doesn't have the alt text. Yes. Then I have the empty and the null alt. And then I have what I would consider short and, concise. It relays what's in the picture, and it's Todd's lobster roll with hot butter and blueberry soda. I could go further into that, but the short and sweet version, there it is. Then we have cases like this. Some people say, "Oh, that's way too much," alt text. I think it's a wonderful example of taking that image and describing that to a screen reader user. I think that is something that I am all for, is a very thorough image description. So the 6 top ones that the top, errors that we find on WebAIM, that list is there. Somebody asked me when I gave this talk, one of the first times, was which one of those would you consider the most important? And the last one on the list there, the missing document language, I think is the most important, because that sets the tone for having that language attribute. If you have that language attribute, great. Then the screen reader is going to be able to read that in that language. If you don't, and you have multiple languages, say it's in English, but you have parts that are in Spanish, the screen reader is not going to know which way to go. So I think right from the get-go, when you're putting in that language attribute, that sets the tone for the entire web document. Are you going to have that page accessible? Is that page going to be accessible? I think that sets the tone. Other things, are your buttons going to be empty? Are you going to have empty links? Are you going to be missing form labels? How well versed are you on accessibility? Do you know a little bit about accessibility? Just enough to say, okay, I can make this somewhat accessible, but I'm going to learn and research to do the rest. Sometimes I found in audits where they don't have a language attribute on the page, and that's it. And then the whole site, in a few instances, has just been inaccessible for screen readers, for keyboard users, and on and on. So those 6 represented 96.5% of all the errors, and that's a lot. That's really, I think a lot of those are low-hanging fruit, and if not all. So I think if we learned, or we taught people to learn the low-hanging fruit of accessibility, that number would be a lot less than that. So I put up some examples of digital accessibility. Color contrast. I worked on the low vision task force in the W3C for a little bit, and it was recommended that the scoring system we have now is a little bit flawed. I don't want to say flawed, but it's the only word that's coming to mind right now. But a 10-to-1 ratio, even if it's like 7-to-1, which is AAA level, if you're exceeding those guidelines, then you're headed in the right direction. When you have accessible color schemes and combinations, making sure that pages are keyboard and screen reader accessible is very important. And we know that sometimes different browser screen reader combinations can be a little different here and there, but having those 2, keyboard and screen reader accessible, is huge in my opinion. And then, these days where we have accessible components, we have components like accordions, modals, and tooltips, to where I see a lot of inaccessible stuff like that. Pop-ups, popovers, pop-tarts, whatever they want to be called. Those things, most of the time, are not accessible. And then performance. I think performance is a huge part of accessibility, because not everybody has the latest and greatest iPhone or Android phone. Not everybody has an iPad. Not everybody has a cable connection or a 5G connection. Some people still have 3G phones. Some people are still in rural areas where they might even have dial-up. So performance is key, especially when it comes to web apps, PWAs, and websites. So somebody asked me this once, and they asked me if disability is just blind, deaf, or paralysis, right? And I like to go back to, that wasn't what I wanted to do. But no, it is not. Let's just get rid of that. There we go. So no, it is not. There are a lot of different disabilities out there, and I've now listed a few. There are learning and cognitive disabilities. There's ADHD and ADD. There's fibromyalgia, arthritis, tremors, Parkinson's. I'm part of the last group here where it's migraine headaches and photophobia. Right now, I have a couple of lights on, and my eyes are still getting slowly adjusted to the light here. Being in Phoenix, it's bright out here all the time. So my eyes are very sensitive to the light. And then there's stuff like these, stuff that we don't hear about daily. Some of these that I didn't even know existed. So, there's a lot more than just being blind or being deaf or deafblind or, paralysis. There's a lot more than that. So some of the excuses, these are some of the things I have heard over the years that have really stuck in my head and kind of fueled me to do what I do and keep doing it. So let's get into some of these. The client doesn't have the budget for it. So I alluded to when I did the contract for the last client I had, I put it in the contract that accessibility, the site would be accessible as best as I could make it. And it was added into the contract. Accessibility was part of the deal, and there was a budget for it. We had the time for it. Many people say, well, the client doesn't have the budget for it. I don't have any say over that. I said, well, just do it. Be like Nike and just do it. We'll get to it after launch. This one's great because I've heard this one a lot. And this one, you can't wait until after launch. Like I said at this outset, accessibility should be a part of the discussion before the project even starts. Whether it's a website, the web app, or even branding, even if you have flyers or newsletters, it should be a part of those conversations. So here are a few more. Why do we have to make this thing accessible? There's no time to do this. Again, we don't have disabled users. The same vice president that I spoke of earlier was also the same one that said, the people that use our product are not disabled. And I alluded to temporary or situational disabilities. I was like, well, why or what if, Susan, for example, goes to work, she has a broken arm and she has to be typing all day. Then she's only working with one arm. That's a temporary disability or situational disability. If you've ever worked with a child on your lap, if you've ever worked with a cat walking all over your keyboard, because cats love to walk all over keyboards, for example, there's something right there. Broken arm, broken hand, broken finger, the examples, there's a lot of different examples. So I said to, I asked this vice president, I said, well, how do you know everything you think you know about your users? And he goes, well, I guess not. No, you don't. You never know when it's going to happen, whether you're going to be temporarily disabled or even permanently disabled. You never know when that's going to happen, and there's always that chance. This was one that really set me off. It's a huge waste of time, and that tells me right there that that person does not care about accessibility, that does not care about disabled users, it does not care about people in general and what they can use on the web and what they can access. It caused this, which is a lot of internal screaming, which turned into this. And we'll just let the picture talk for itself, or speak for itself. But that set me off. So there was a lot of education behind that one. That one took days. And eventually I was able to talk that person into finally letting me give examples. I'll go over some of those examples soon. So buy-in, this leads to buy-in. How do you get these people to buy in? How do you get these organizations to buy in? I line up all my lobsters in a row, and then I do these. I have these little examples. If you get support from the top down, then that's going to trickle down to managers, teams, and individuals in the organization. If you do it from the start, you can always say to your developers, your designers, this low maintenance, you're going to be less stressed. You're going to have to work less because you won't have to go back and reinvent the wheel and make things accessible again. And, because of accessible designs and clean code, your life is going to be a lot easier. And, if that doesn't get through to people, I pull out the Domino's pizza card. I'm not afraid to use that one. Or any of the other thousands of examples where major corporations or organizations have been sued. Domino's Pizza, we all know that one. They could have spent $38,000 internally to fix their website. It ended up costing them 7 figures, and it took 2, 3, maybe even 4 appeals in court, and they still lost. So, did that work for them? No. There are laws in place, and I'll go over some of those in a little while. And then the other thing too is to show people, like C-suite level people, live testing with disabled users that is recorded on video. I have turned many, many people around from non-believers to, okay, let's do this, because of sessions of testing recorded on video with disabled users. That shows that that person at least has empathy. And you have to have empathy in accessibility as an auditor or an engineer. You have to. So those are some of the tricks, I guess you could say, of how I would get buy-in over the years. And then I hit the money. The money thing is, I don't think I've ever met a C-level leader or a stakeholder or whatever, whoever, that, for instance, if your company sells zippers worldwide, you're not going to want a piece of this. It's just $8 trillion worldwide of disposable income of individuals with disabilities. I've never heard a C-suite level go, I don't want a part of that. Of course they're going to want a part of that. That's money. They're seeing that dollar sign and the 8 and the trillion. And then after that, I guess they're blanking out. But making things accessible, getting that buy-in from that top person, again, is going to trickle down to the rest of the organization. And in this country alone, $490 billion of disposable income of individuals with disabilities, that's a lot. And if I got to hit the money, if I got to play the money card, I'll play the money card. That's how serious I am with getting accessibility into organizations. So advocating, having advocates is very important to an organization. If you have organization advocates, then life is going to be so much easier. Having a person in each department, or having a team of people, an accessibility team, and having one person as a liaison in between departments, in between design, development, marketing, PMs, this, that, and the other thing. Have those people that can answer questions, work with others to make accessible products. And those people probably will be able to set up documentation, they'll be able to set up tooling, and they'll serve as an intermediary between departments and get together and say, okay, we need to use X Core, for instance, and get that into our, accessibility testing workflow. Excuse me. And then, there's also assessment. When I go into an organization, I like to assess where the level of the organization's at. So gauging where the product is, how far as accessible it is, how inclusive that product is. That's a key priority. That's my first thing that I do after getting people on board. What is the state of that product? What is the state of the website, the mobile app? Getting the, level of knowledge, a general idea of the level of knowledge that people have in the organization. Do they know anything about WCAG guidelines? I've met people that have had no idea what the WCAG guidelines are, and that's fine. Do they have a good idea what WCAG is and the practices? Do they know about web standards? Do they know about usability and UX? How much training will you need with these people? All that, getting a general idea of all that, and then taking that bit of information and saying, okay, I have this to work with, and then going further with that, which is into training. How much training am I going to need to train these people? How much, should I just give them some links and resources, or do I have to go in for training once a week with a team? So if you haven't maintained a written record, then everything will be there in black and white for you. So, of all the training done, it meets the requirements of the organization if the organization even practices accessibility. There are some organizations I've spoken with that don't have any requirements at all. And again, it's a great way to keep data on all the training in the organization. Who trained, when it was completed, do they need a refresher course? Do they need to get caught up to speed on something in a certain area? If there's no inter-organizational training, use those orgs that are listed right there. DQ, WebAIM, TPGI are three that I know of. There are probably more, definitely, but these three are some of the leaders in training. And then there's the guidelines. I like to preface this by saying, we don't fully lean on the guidelines because there are gaps in the guidelines. And a little spoiler here, I'm working on some stuff in WCAG 3 for the W3C that hopefully will take and fill in these gaps. Fingers crossed. So, consistent implementation. Are your design systems accessible and inclusive? Because if they are, developers are going to understand code better. Designers are going to have an easier time designing, and they're going to understand a little bit about accessibility. So your designers are learning, your developers are learning, everybody's learning. Your accessible components reduce time to implement. Testing procedures so that people can do their jobs well, and documenting guidelines in a collaborative manner using tools. I use Notion. You can use Google Docs, you can use Google Sheets, whatever you want to use. Guidelines like WCAG are the ones that I'm talking about, where we don't lean on them totally, and I'll share a little bit about that shortly. Which brings me to standards. So I like to say, if you know a little bit about some of these, then you're a step ahead. I've been writing up a little documentation for a course at my organization to get people familiarized with accessibility. I learned a thing or two this morning from reading about the Air Carrier Access Act and the Communications and Video Accessibility Act. So anytime I can learn something is a win for my day. If you know a little bit about the ADA, if you know a little bit about Section 508, even Section 504, 501, and I believe 505, you're a step ahead. The Accessible Canada Act, the accessibilities for Ontarians, I should say, I got to fix that, Ontarians with Disabilities Act, the EN 301549 in the EU, and then there's the WCAG. So WCAG, it's internationally, a lot of different countries recognize WCAG as the guidelines for accessibility. Going back to filling those gaps where we need to, don't lean too heavily on saying, well, this has got to be, set in stone from this guideline in WCAG. There's always the edge case for something to come along, or somebody to come along and say, hey, this doesn't work. Oh, but it abides to this success criteria. Well, there's that gap. So we got to watch out for that. And then I threw in what the UN has on the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in Articles 9 and 21. I throw that in there as well. That last one, it's good to know. Basically, what it entails is the internet is a basic human right. And then we get to testing. A lot of testing. Again, test and record cases where disabled users are using the product. Present those findings to the top people. Using AccessWorks or Fable. Those are two companies that do testing with disabled people and hire disabled people. This is an important one. This is a huge one for me. I've learned so much from people with disabilities over the years. They are always teaching me something new, and I see them always advocating. They have those lived experiences, so I'm learning constantly. So hiring disabled people for an accessibility team, I think, is crucial to the success of an accessibility team and an organization. It's very important. We have to start doing that.
Sorry to interrupt you, Todd, but we have some questions here, and we're getting a little low on time. So I wanted to see if there's any last point you want to make here, and then we can jump into a handful of questions and wrap up. Sorry, we got a little bit of a late start because you and I were chatting a lot.
Yeah, no problem. I wanted to discuss a little bit about overlays for a second.
Absolutely.
I heard this one was an excuse. We have an accessibility overlay. We're okay. So, of course, we know overlays will get you sued. But basically, they're just snake oil. And they don't work. And that company right there, whom I will not name, but they're the biggest snake oil salesman. There's some other companies here real quick. I'll just show that. I'll leave a link for my slides in case anybody wants to read through the slides. And that does not make your website accessible. I always say, accessibility is a right, not a privilege. And then we have this quote by Tim Berners-Lee. And other than that, like I said, my links are there. So that's about it for that.
Thanks so much, and thanks for covering off on those last final points. Sorry to rush you through them, but we have a few questions.
Oh, no worries. Sure.
I'm going to go ahead and put them up on the screen and read it off. So the first question we have is, how do you make the case for performance issues and accessibility?
So I like to point out that, again, everybody doesn't have the latest and greatest phones, tablets, computers. They don't have, everybody doesn't have a cable line. If you want maximum coverage, accessibility wise, then you'll make sure everything's performant. That means web pages and apps. I know of my father, for instance. He does not have a cable. He doesn't have cable internet. He's back in the 80s. Well, I shouldn't say 80s. He's back in the early 2000s, and he still has a DSL line, and he lives in a very rural area. So when I get a phone call and I hear the frustration on his voice, this website isn't loading, that's how I make the case for performance issues. I really go into, if I don't have a personal story to share, then I'll just say, you know what? There's somebody somewhere with a 3G phone that might be trying to order something off of your website, and your website is still loading half an hour later.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just in Iowa over the weekend with my parents, and yeah, there's times when I got zero signal in places, and I absolutely loved it for what I do, but it can be frustrating at times for sure. Another question here. So the question is, what do you do when there is no leadership buy-in?
That's a very good question, because I had this actually happen recently. They didn't want to buy in, and I said, okay. And this was the same organization that had the overlay. And I said, okay, well, should you need me, let me know, and we'll talk. And not 2 days later, from what I found out, the lawsuit threats started to happen. And then 3 days later, they got in touch with me and said, we need you. And the first thing I said was, get rid of the overlay. Get rid of the overlay. And yes, they lock you into a contract, but you can still get rid of the overlay. And I know a lot of places, like small businesses, for instance, they don't have a legal team to do that, to be able to do that. I'm like, well, ride out the storm. And then when that contract is done, don't renew it. So when there's no leadership buy-in, I'll say, okay, if you need me, let me know. And with the litigious society that we have today, I might have pronounced that wrong, but anyways, either they'll call back or, they'll find somebody to help them. And if they don't, they're going to learn the hard way. I mean, you can't really pressure these people into buying in. They have to be able to want to do it.
Yeah. Those aha moments come, and then you just take advantage of that. We're at the top of the hour, but we started a little bit late, so I feel okay asking one more question, and then we'll wrap up. And then I'm also going to look at the YouTube while you answer this question. So last question I'll ask, and then I'll see if there's more. What do you do when your company gives you pushback on including an accessibility coordinator liaison because it, quote, won't add enough to the company's bottom line, unquote?
That's a really good question too, because one, when they give you pushback, I say pushback a little harder. And by that, I mean, okay, you've stated your case, but here's mine. And so for the second half of that, including an ally, coordinate a liaison, because it won't add enough to the company's bottom line. The company won't have a bottom line if you're getting sued.
Solid.
You have those people that are looking at, and there are laws, there are guidelines, and sooner or later it's going to happen where, especially these days, you'll get sued. So I would say push back a little bit harder. And, if you have to talk about the bottom line, you say, well, the bottom line is at some point we'll get sued. And this is going to cover us from getting sued, is having an accessibility team, coordinator, or liaison.
Yeah. If you don't want to do it right, if you don't want to code it the right way, because naturally the code should be accessible. If you like adding a language to the site, that is just bad coding if you do not add that. So all those things just are helpful moving forward. So call it just raising the ship, the water. Everybody rises as it all gets better.
Yeah.
So is there any last final points that you want to make? And then I'll go ahead and wrap this up. Do you have any last words of advice for those of us wanting to make our organizations embrace accessibility more?
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of advocating. But if you keep at it, and if you keep that fire burning inside that you want to bring that accessibility to your organization, just do it. Again, like Nike, just do it. Keep at it, and it gets tiring. It gets, you have your moments. Like I've had my moments over the years, but if you keep on doing it, it'll pay off. It'll pay off, definitely. And enjoy it.
Thanks. I find myself just constantly learning. So I even learned in this talk. Just there's so much to learn. There's so much to go out and know more. So it's never over. The struggle of convincing is never over. The application of it, every site, every piece that I build, it's vigilance is what I find is making sure that it goes all the way through.
Yeah. And like the web, accessibility is it's evolving just like the web is. And sometimes good, sometimes bad. I mean, we're seeing it, the bad side with these overlays. We see the good side with keeping up on accessibility and making things accessible for people.
That's great. Well, thanks so much, Todd, for sharing your knowledge. Good luck with your talk later. And
thank you.
Hopefully some people will take you up on joining you there and getting some discount on the tickets. So just let me know. You can hit me up on Twitter. It's at Todd Libby, and I'll be more than happy to send you the code. Amazing. Any links from today's talk, we can also put out there on Twitter, like the article, we shared throughout. I can't say enough about our accessibility talks coming up for this fall. Our team's been working really hard. So the rest of this year, we have some really great speakers lined up, and I'm really excited to bring that to everybody. So join us next month. Look for those announcements as we kind of finalize all the details, but we have some really good speakers lined up. But it's also a reminder that we're looking for new voices. We're looking for new speakers. We make a conscious effort to include marginalized groups in our tech. So just marginalized groups for our speaker lineup. So please reach out, let us know. If you have an idea, if you need any help, we also know people that put on speaker workshops to help you refine that idea and get that idea out there. So don't hesitate get your voice out there. And also, we're continually learning our website and how we do these talks. So if you have any advice or anything else to make Alley Talks better, please just let us know. We're open to all of that. Last few things, a reminder for those of you with IAAP certifications, this is, you qualify for professional development credits by watching this and participating. So that's part of your continuing education. So that's important. And please follow us on our YouTube channel to never miss a talk. Follow us on Twitter. And finally, consider contributing to the Alley Talks through an open collective. We are a nonprofit, and we're working diligently to take those funds and pay our speakers and just pay for things around here. We're all volunteer based. We're really passionate about it, and we're working hard to kind of get that more community focused and get out there with it. So thanks so much, Todd, and everybody, and we'll see you next time.
See ya. Bye-bye.